Petroff's defense is a good defense for black. A lot of traps on both sides. After e4, e5, nf3, nf6, this is the Petroff defense. Now, white can play d4. That's one main variation. The other one is knight takes pawn on d5. Now, the normal line is to kick back the knight, but a trapper line that black doesn't want to do is knight takes pawn to play symmetrical. White can play queen e2. Black plays queen e7. White plays d3. The knight has to move somewhere. Knight c6 wins the queen. So that's a known trap. So after knight takes a pawn at e5, black plays d6 and kicks back the knight to f3. Now white, after knight takes pawn, will play knight c3 in this variation. Now, more popular is the d4, d5, bishop d3 line. Bishop then can go to e7 or d6, and that's the normal variation for Petroff. But in my variation, knight c3 is what I like to play. Now you can either take the knight or run away. So if you back off the knight to f6, white can control the center with d4. Black is ready to castle after bishop e7. White does the same with bishop d3. Both castle. Pretty equal game with this after this is played with this. Black can probably continue up to d5, and white can play rook to e1, etc. However, after knight c3 and knight takes knight, two ways of taking. You can take towards the center or away from the center. So if pawn takes at c3 from the b file, black will play d5 to control the center. d4 is the control the center for white. Black will play bishop d6. White will play bishop d3, and both parties will castle with an even game. But white can also take away from the center with pawn on d takes at c3. Now black can continue with bishop e7, bishop e3, castle, and maybe castle bishop c4, and white can castle next with this. However, in this case, black played bishop e7 right away to castle right away, and white could have developed his bishop to c4 right away with this, and that would have been possible with this. So with this line on this played, knight c6 is being played, and then bishop e3 is played instead of a bishop c4. Black can play bishop e7, white can play bishop c4. Both sides can castle or prevention, and that's a pretty even game with this. But black wants to pin the knight with bishop to g4. Now, white could continue with bishop c4 ready to castle, bishop e7, both sides castle. It's pretty even. Instead, I played h3 and want to kick back the bishop. Now, the bishop can go and play other lines with this. The bishop can back up or to bishop h5, which he did in a game, or he can try to take the bishop. The queen takes the bishop, bishop e7. White can castle queenside, and that would be another variation. Or the bishop can go all the way back, bishop d3, bishop e7, queen to d2. White can castle either side in this case. But in the game, black played the bishop b5. Now, one interesting idea is white plays queen to d5, but if there's an exchange, don't double up the pawns. Queen takes a bishop, you're okay. Black will follow up with bishop e7. Maybe white can play bishop to b5 and castle. So after the backup with this, white plays bishop to c4, ready to castle and get the bishop out. And now black makes a horrible mistake. At this point, something like queen to d7, with the idea of castling perhaps queenside or holding the center. White does have queen to d5. Bishop g7 holds everything with that. Another variation would be, instead of queen to d7, simply bishop e7 ready to castle. Queen d5, bishop g6 first, castle, castle, everything is fine. But the mistake that black made was this, knight to e5, thinking, well, I got a knight and bishop on this knight trade. My knight's his knight's attacking my bishop on c4. But at this point, white can sacrifice his queen. Knight takes knight, allowing black to take the queen. So if pawn takes, if we look at it again, pawn takes the knight, white takes the bishop on h5. so he wins a piece. If black tries queen to f6, queen to d5 is threatening too much. For example, if you try to castle queen side, white can play knight c6, and if pawn takes knight, queen takes c6 with the mate threat with the bishop coming in to a3, a6, and queen to b7. So black doesn't know that. Bishop takes the queen. White then finishes off with bishop takes at f7. King's only got one move. Now bishop g5, checkmate. Good trap.